ever got while I was trying to recover from burnout was to keep a gratitude journal.
That's bad advice? Cait, I
Yes.
love having a gratitude journal. Why is
Yeah.
that such bad advice when you're burned out?
When you are not burned out, a gratitude journal is a fabulous thing to have. There are plenty of studies that support that it's useful. It's kind of hard to do a double-blind study on a gratitude journal because you know that you're doing it. So, of course, focused intention and all of that, but it still does show to be useful. However, gratitude is mostly useful when you can jot down those 3 things you're grateful for, be really specific about them, and at the same time engender that feeling. So if you don't have a visceral response to the things that you're writing down, it's not gonna do anything for you. Just writing down, "I really love the shape of my mug, and my lipstick was on point today, and also, like, so glad I have a roof over my head." Just writing those things down without a visceral response, without a physiological response to them, doesn't actually get you anywhere. And when you're burnt out, engendering feelings of gratitude is really, really hard. So being told to do a gratitude journal when you're burnt out feels like a little paternalistic, a little bit of a slap in the face, a little bit like, listen, if I could feel better by snapping my fingers, I probably would, but I'm tired and I'm angry and I'm resentful and I cannot find the gratitude right now. I know I can read the news. I know how lucky I am. I just don't feel it right now. So don't make me do it.
I like that. I was prepared to fight, right? And then you totally made sense there because absolutely, if this just check the box and there's no emotion and it's just like, okay, well, Phil says do a gratitude journal. No, that doesn't work. And I totally do agree with that. I think it is about the energy. I believe that is why it works because it reminds us of those things that otherwise we forget, those little micro joys that we miss otherwise. So I think that's awesome advice. And Cait Donovan, you're with us today because of your awesome podcast and probably also because your awesome spectacles, right? Fried is the name of your show, right? The Burnout podcast. So you've been studying burnout for a long time. Why'd you get started? Why is it important to you?
It's kind of the same story as everybody else, right? I burnt out terribly. And my recovery process was largely not helped by the research that I was reading. I did have help. I am not one of those people that walks around saying, "I figured it out by myself and now I want to help you do it faster." No, I did not figure it out by myself. I don't believe you should figure out burnout by yourself. I think that there's a co-regulation of your nervous system that needs to happen and that requires other people. So I think that's important. But when I was going through burnout, I'm a super nerd. So my husband was doing, who's also a super nerd, was doing an extra postgraduate degree at Cambridge University at the time. We were living in Europe and he was commuting to Cambridge to do this degree. And so I had access to university libraries, which for the nerds out there, you know how wonderful it is to have access to university libraries. Yeah. So I downloaded everything that was available on burnout. It took me a year to go through all the material. I burnt out as a female entrepreneur in a job that I loved. The research did not speak to me. It was corporate workers, doctors, and nurses. That was it. Over and over and over again. And so I had to sit down and say, well, how do these things apply to me and my situation? How do I make sense of what's going on with me based on the information that we already have, based on 40 years of research that thank God someone did because I didn't have to, but still doesn't necessarily apply to me. And that's where this work came from. It started with the book, The Bounce Back Ability Factor, which was written for burnout and female entrepreneurs. At the time, there was nothing else on that topic at all. When I released it, what I found was a lot of men were reading it. I had men get on like Zoom calls with me when I was going through the sort of like book club phase of my book, saying that they cried while they were reading it. So it was definitely not only geared towards women, but that was the story that I was telling from the get-go because that was my personal experience. From that came the podcast and the speaking and the. So now I work in companies, in corporations, so I am using some of that research from before, but I'm also using the research that I had to do myself to fill in the gaps of what was happening to me that isn't included here.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, your book spoke to me as well as a non-female entrepreneur, right? As someone who certainly has felt that, been there, done that,
Yeah.
sometimes still there. It's hard. It's not a. I to your point earlier, right? If we could just snap our fingers and say, "Bang, it's done.
Yeah.
Get over your burnout, dude."
Yeah.
Yeah, that wouldn't that be awesome? But that's not the case.
No.
That's not the case at all. So, so you did all this research, and then you did your own work here. Um, I've got to ask though. So, was there anything surprising that you found out that was like, oh my gosh, like I would have never expected that, or was it all like, oh yeah, that's totally all me?
I was I thought I was self-aware. So I was walking around in the world as this person who is totally assuming that she's really self-aware. I know why I act certain ways, I know why certain things come up, and there were huge empty holes of things in my life that I wasn't really paying attention to, that I had a hard time admitting to, that I had a hard time facing. And all of those things surprised me. I did a lot of research into adverse childhood experiences and their relationship with burnout later in life. And when I was first sort of digging into this idea that early childhood trauma could lead to burnout later, I've had this internal fight happening because I really like my parents. And I didn't I thought if I said that there was early childhood trauma, that would mean sort of saying something against them, when in reality, I was just telling the truth about what happened and how I interpreted it as a child. And there were some things that definitely fit onto the adverse childhood experiences scale. Not as much as some other people, more than some other people. Sort of, I was in the danger zone for ACEs. There's this sort of scale. You take a quiz and you can get, up to 10 or whatever it is. They change it every couple of years, but having 4 or above puts you at serious danger for adverse health experiences, poor health choices and health behaviors as you grow, inability to connect with other people easily, inability to trust other people, having this idea that the world happens to you instead of having an ability to influence your world. So that the 4 is sort of like, for sure you're going to have some problems with these things. And I had 3 at first count. And I was like, "Oh, okay, well, this makes more sense," but I did have to work through this idea of, like, my parents are not bad people, they did the best they could, I love them now, but maybe not everything was so great when I was younger.
Mm, that's so interesting, right? Because yeah, I feel that. I feel that in my heart, right? I think we don't want to blame our parents. We want to own our shit, right?
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, like it or not, we had trauma as children. I mean, I would argue every kid has trauma, right? I mean, the joke, it's like when I say something to a kid, I'm like, yep, they're gonna bring that up in therapy.
Yeah. Well,
Yep.
some
I
of it
mean,
is trauma, and then there are I think what I fail to say sometimes, and something that I fail to focus on sometimes because 'cause I'm so focused on letting people know that this is a thing, I fail to say that there are what I now call in my business burnout protection factors. So you could have a 2 out of 10 on the ACEs scale, but you could have other protective factors that buffered out those experiences. So protective factors are like a super strong community where you feel really safe. At least one adult who really believed in you when you didn't think you were gonna get that sort of belief from anybody, having a good, set of friends, having parents that even occasionally tuned into your emotional state, having fairly healthy food and an exercise routine as you were growing up. All of these things are burnout protection factors. All of these things are positive childhood experiences that can buffer down some of the adverse childhood experiences. So while every nervous system is going to interpret some situations as dangerous and have a hard time recovering from them, some nervous systems also get the added benefit of having extra care and extra love that buffers those experiences for you so they don't have as much of an adverse effect later in life.
That's encouraging. That's
Right?
encouraging that we have those buffers, right? Because
Yeah.
otherwise, it's like, "Oh, crap, this is just gonna be." So
Right.
talk a little bit more about the power of one, right? One person believing in you. I feel I was super fortunate. My teachers to this day are still super, like, they still believe in me. I mean, I'm friends with many of them on Facebook. They cheer me on when when I've written books, when I do stuff, and my librarian was like my best friend. So I feel super fortunate about that.
Yeah.
So what is this science? What does your research show about that, Kate?
Not my personal research, but research that I've read does show that having one adult who consistently shows up for you and tells you that they believe in you and lets you know that they're watching out for you and that what you do matters and that how you show up matters and that your success matters to them, just that alone is enough to buffer out a pretty extreme traumatic experience. Having somebody that believes in you can literally change the entire course of your life.
Awesome.
It's
Awesome.
amazing.
That is amazing. And that's so encouraging for us because finding a one person is a lot easier than finding 100 people.
Yeah.
So that's where, a counselor, a grandparent, maybe, if you come from a single parent home like me, right? Like your mom,
An
somebody like
aunt,
that.
an older sister, a
Right.
cousin, it doesn't even matter the person from the YMCA, like, it doesn't really matter, and I think one of the things that my life was missing was that I had those adverse childhood experiences, but I was also a gifted child, so I did really well in school, which meant I didn't get a lot of attention. Because they didn't I grew up in a poverty-driven, stricken neighborhood where people really did need a lot of support, so I was sort of the one that was always fine, like, I didn't need anything from anybody, so they thought. So I wasn't paid extra attention to, I was sent into another classroom to read because I was reading at a different grade level, so I was by myself. I didn't have that extra attention because I didn't look like a child in need. Because I was academically successful.
Mm, wow. Wow. That's
Not that I
so
didn't have amazing teachers, because I did. I just wasn't their primary focus because there's kids that were coming into school that didn't have any breakfast and couldn't focus. And they were like, "How do I get this kid breakfast? How do
mhm.
I make sure they come in with clean clothes so they're not made fun of for being stinky? How do I" They had real big problems to worry about in the classroom, and I just wasn't one of them. I don't fault them for it. I just wasn't one of their problems.
Wow. 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 That's good stuff. So let's move forward to this adult burnout that we can
Mm,
hopefully deal with a little better,
mm.
and the bounce back ability factor. So much great stuff in there, Kate.
Thank
Congratulations on
thank you.
that book. So
Thank
by
you.
the way. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about, first of all, this whole idea of returning to the office. I,
Yeah.
of course, did a little bit of research before we got on, and I'm like, oh, that makes sense, right? Return to office AIDS, I don't know, increases burnout. AIDS is the wrong word there. Sorry about that, right? Increases burnout or maybe bounces it back into you. So talk to me about return to office. What have you found that has that's affected, and how can we help that be lesser?
I think the return to office has a couple of problems. I think before we even get to the return to office, we are just now within the past 6 or 7 months kind of getting to the other side of what we went through with COVID. So when we all know this experience that when you have, like, a super stressful time and then you take a weekend off, you end up getting a cold because you're slowing down so much. But when you're in that stressful time, you don't actually feel stressed. You're just like, "Go, go, 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 go," because you know that things need to get done. There's a deadline, there's a whatever it happens to be. So we all know this experience of going through extreme stress and then having, like, a letdown that ends up in a migraine or a stomach bug or a flu or a cold. We were in this extreme level of stress and change and worry and fighting with each other about whether or not we should mask and if we should stay home and if we shouldn't. And, we were in extreme levels of stress all together as a community for extended periods of time. The come down from that takes ages. And we've only started this return to work really in the past 6 months or so. This is the same time that we're getting to the other side of that major stress, and all of us are now being like, "Oh my god, we are tired. Holy what just happened?" And we're not thinking about it because we think COVID happened 2 years ago, so we should be fine now. That's old news. It's not old news in your physical body. Your physical body is still processing that. So I think the first problem is that we're in that come down, where a lot of us are working through the fatigue and the sickness and the illness and the all the things that pop up post stress. So that's number 1. That's the one thing that's making it difficult. The next thing that's making it difficult is we rearranged our lives completely. No more commuting, setting up home offices, buying different houses because they had office space available to us. Like, we made really big changes. We moved cities because we didn't have to be in the office. And now we have people changing the rules of monopoly on us.
Mm.
That's just upsetting. Whether or not you agree with being in the office or not being in the office is not the point at all. The point is that we are changing the rules of engagement halfway through the game, and we expect everybody to just go along with it. But I know people that lived in Boston that moved 2 or 3 hours west. So now they're supposed to commute 6 hours round trip because you changed the rules? They got hired as a remote worker, but you're changing the rules? And now you have people that are like, "Well, I can't do that, actually physically can't do it, so now I have to find a new job." No jobs in Western Massachusetts pay the same amount as they do in Boston. This is the same as every big city and, rural area. That I'm just using that as an example because I know people that have that exact, situation. So how are we not supposed to be upset about that? So I think the first step to dealing with it is just recognizing the fact that, "Hey, I have some agency here and I might have to make some tough decisions, but I really have to focus in on how this is affecting me and what's actually doable and possible." And then go from there.
Yeah. Wow. That's so interesting. It's so good to hear those out loud because no matter how self-aware we are, I mean, I would assume that I'm through this stuff
Yeah.
as an entrepreneur. Probably not.
No, and you
Probably
just moved
not.
recently. So you just
Right.
added another layer of
Hmm.
stress things to go through and another come down.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, that's so interesting. That's so interesting. It's making me think just a lot. So thank you for that, Cait. So with that, one of the things that I read about is this like do minimal work on Monday thing, which is so interesting to me. Like, why, why Monday? Is it because we slide in, or what is that? And I'm reading all this, and I'm like, I don't know. Like, I guess I kind of get that, but not really. So, what do you think that is? That minimal work Monday? What do you think? How, does that help? Is that just another way to cope, or what? What do you think?
It's hard to know what helps because every single person is gonna need something different. I have been on minimal work Mondays for years, since way before COVID. So I like this idea because I don't like to jolt so harshly between Sunday free to do what you want and Monday, like, have a full schedule. That's a really hard thing for me to, like, jostle. So, personally, I don't take calls on Mondays for the most part. If I do, it's a special event, kind of. I'd mostly do admin work on Mondays that don't require me to, like, have makeup on or clothes, for that matter. I can do whatever I want on Mondays, and I think that that's really useful. I think it does help people slide into the week a little bit easier. I also think that we probably don't need to be working 5 days a week anymore, and we're moving towards a different schedule, and this is people's way en masse of, like, making this shift more reasonable and more sort of in your face so that companies will hop on board. Like, there's no we this is not the Industrial Revolution anymore. There's no reason for us to be working 8 to 5. Like, doesn't e there's no and we are not effective from 8 to 5. On a neurological level, we can't be effective from 8 to 5. So, what are we doing?
Hmm. Working with Speaker Flow, I'm fortunate. We work 4-day weeks,
Yeah.
and that certainly is wonderful for me. That absolutely has helped. That's a conscious choice. We put people over profits here and make sure that everyone has the space and the energy that they need. But not everyone is so fortunate. And sometimes it's just stress. And I say just stress. We put quotes around that, right? You had a recent episode on Friday the Burnout podcast that you talked about that, how to tell if it's burnout or stress.
Mhm.
So how do we know? How do we differentiate, Cait?
The easiest way to differentiate between burnout and stress is your ability to bounce back. If you are stressed, you will take the weekend off and you will feel refreshed and ready to go on Monday. If you are burnt out, you will take a 10-day vacation and not be refreshed and ready to go when you come back.
Ooh, that's an easy way to know. So what do we do about that though? I mean, like that sucks. I took 10 days off and now I'm just as tired as I
Or
was
if
10
not
days ago
more,
or more or more.
or
Yeah.
more.
So what the heck do I do, Cait?
I mean, how much time do we have?
We'll get another hour. We're good.
Another hour. I think that there's so many different ways to start this process. There are people out there that have a protocol for like burnout recovery. And I don't actually believe in a protocol for burnout recovery because each of us is so different. And I think this falls back on my Chinese medicine background. So I treated people. I was a acupuncturist, an in-person practitioner for 15 years. And in Chinese medicine, two people can come in with a headache and have completely different treatments based on the quality of the pain, the location of the pain, the length of time that it's been happening, the intensity of it, etc. So we will use completely different points for two different headaches because the headaches are not the same and the people are not the same. I treat burnout the same way in my practice. That being said, there are two elements that we need to work on always in everyone, no matter what. We need to always increase internal feelings of safety. So, on some level, we have to find a way to convince your physical body and your brain and your nervous system that you are safe. That's one thing that we always have to do as part of what we're doing, no matter what. The other thing that we have to do is increase your levels of self trust. So we need your body to trust you to respond to its signals. We call this foundational self-care in my business. That when your body says, I'm thirsty, you're going to respond and have something to drink. When your body says, I have to go to the bathroom, you're going to respond, not write two more emails. You're going to get up and go to the bathroom. When your body says, I need to rest or my eyes are tired from staring at this screen, you're going to give yourself a way to break up that time staring at a screen, or you're going to give yourself some way to rest. So you have to start building in this sort of conversation with your body where your body's saying, hey, I have this need. And you're going, hey, I got you. And of course, you're never going to do it 100% of the time because you might be on the highway when you decide you need to pee and there's not a bathroom available, right? Like that's going to happen sometimes. So I'm not saying that you have to be perfect at it, but we do so much overriding of our basic signals, and that inability to let our bodies know that they can trust us leads to feelings of lack of safety. Oh my god, am I going to pee in my car? I'm not going to be taken care of. I'm not getting rest. I'm not getting the things that I need. I must shut down. I know that my needs aren't going to be met, so I'm not going to have them. Just give me sugar, it's fine. Just give me coffee, it's fine. And we start changing the signals because we're going after any way of getting what we need to maintain what it is you're asking us for.
So we break down instead of breaking down, or instead of getting broken down, right? We kind of pre-break that down, and our
Yeah.
bodies say, "The heck with you! You're
Yeah.
going to screw me over, so I'm just going to bust it right now because I need it," and that's too bad.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the body will ask for more caffeine and more sugar and more to keep going because you're demanding that it continues. So it says, "Well, if you're gonna demand that I continue, then you better pull out those M&Ms because I can't do it otherwise." I mean, I love I mean, I have a coffee right here, Lisa. I'm into it. I'm not anti-coffee. I love a coffee used intentionally and or used to override things sometimes on purpose when you know that you're doing it. But for me, when I override myself, I have to pay myself back somehow.
Yeah. Well, and Lisa's the point here about sometimes dehydrated. That's because we ignored it.
Right.
We're
We're
not we
dehydrated because we didn't drink when we knew that we were thirsty and we
right.
didn't. Yeah,
Yeah, right. Like we didn't do that
exactly.
sooner. And I
Exactly.
can tell you that hits me as well. That hits me. I'm like, why do I not have water by my desk? Why do I not have this or that? So yeah, so interesting. So interesting. So Cait, give us some bad advice about burnout. You had an episode on this that I think is both funny as well as very sad. So talk to me about some bad advice. Let's give folks some bad
What do
advice
you
to debunk
remember
those.
from that episode?
Oh my gosh. It just made me laugh, to be honest with you. Like I read that, I'm like, oh, Cait.
I love when people this is the one that I started with was, make a to-do list. Like, F off. I
Yeah.
can't,
Well,
like,
any of the force stuff, right? Any of the force stuff
yeah, go away.
is just not going to work
Yeah.
because I'm already overwhelmed.
Yeah, this is not helping. This is
Right.
not helping. I think that's, a lot of people will tell you also to push through so that you can figure it out later, and it's like, well, your nervous system is already fried, like, that's not gonna help. I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, that I think gratitude journals are a terrible idea when you're burnt out. Getting to the point in your recovery where you can actively use a gratitude journal again is one of the signs that you're recovering. So it's a good thing to use as like a signal that you're getting better, right? So that's great. But when you're first burnt out, I highly recommend, and this is copywritten, so there's that. But I highly recommend a resentment journal to start out.
A resentment journal.
Yes.
Like stuff that ticks you off and that
Yes.
you're like, I
Yes.
hate this.
Yes.
So the opposite of a gratitude journal. Okay,
Yes.
talk to us, Cait.
So we do a resentment journal when we're burnt out because A, it's the lowest hanging fruit. This is the emotion that's most available to you, so let's use it for something. B, emotions like resentment, anger, irritation, envy, jealousy, all of these sort of things, they're really costly energetically. They cause a lot of rumination, they're heavy to carry, like they cost us a lot energetically. So if we can transform them into something useful, then what we're doing is releasing some of the energy that we need to deal with our burnout. It's because it's not being used up by all of these emotions. And this lovely thing that resentment allows us to do is it will show us every single place where our boundaries are being crossed, both by ourselves in our own lives and by other people from like the external side. But the majority of the time we're crossing our own boundaries. We're not going to sleep when we're tired. We're not drinking when we're thirsty. We are offering people help before they're asking for it when they don't even want it or need it. And then we're resentful that they're not grateful enough for the help that we gave them that they didn't even want.
That's not helping us.
No,
Come on, Cait.
it's not helping.
What the heck, right? So that's so comical, right? So
Yeah.
so look at this, right? Yeah, the F it list instead
Yes,
of
I'm into it, Lisa.
yeah, that's funny.
Yeah.
That is funny. So wow.
So we use
Wow.
resentment journaling in my work, because I find that, and we also don't give ourselves permission to feel that emotion. We're not so anger and resentment are, like, bad, especially if I grew up in the Roman Catholic Church, like, you don't do anger. We do guilt really well.
Bury that.
Yeah, yeah. Right? It's not kind. It's not you if you wanna give, then you should give generously and you should feel good about it. But when you are giving generously and you don't feel good about it, you have to have a way to check yourself before you wreck yourself. Like, figure out what things you're doing that you don't actually need to be doing so that you can buy back some of your own energy so that you can get back to getting healthy. Burnout left untreated will lead to eventually this type of chronic stress will lead to heart attacks, strokes, different types of heart disorders, diabetes, type 2, obviously, right? It leads to big, expensive problems for you personally, for our healthcare system. Like this, we really need to deal with this. And if I can get you some energy back by helping you to figure out how to adjust your life to have less resentment, then I'm winning.
And then we're all winning.
Then we're all literally, it literally helps everybody for you to have less resentment, for you to not be playing. This was something that I didn't know about myself that I found surprising in my recovery. I was such a martyr. Watch as I sacrifice myself and do everything for everybody so that I'm loved. And then everybody's like, ew, go away. And I'm like, what? I helped you. Say thank you. Aren't you grateful for all the things I do? And they're like, I didn't want any of those things. Oh, huh.
So how do we force people to be grateful for the stuff they don't want, Cait? That's the question I've got. No? All right, we won't answer that one. Okay. Right? I mean, come on,
That's
right?
it
What?
though.
That's it though. That's
That's it.
it.
Yeah.
So that's so funny. So with that, right? With that, okay, let's pretend that I'm self-aware enough to know that I'm burnt out. Right?
Mhm,
I've listened to this and I've said, okay, I took a vacation. I'm more
mhm,
tired.
mhm,
This sucks.
mhm.
Okay, great. Now what? How do we get started? How do we start
Yeah.
bouncing back?
The resentment journal, I think, is a really good place to start.
Okay.
Because if you can start to notice where you are spending energy that you are not getting back, then you can stop spending energy in those places, and then you can have that energy to address other problems. This is to me the very basic do that. Start with the resentment journal. The next step is practice foundational self-care. The the unofficial tagline of my podcast is pee when you have to pee. And I say it because it makes people giggle, and I like to do that, especially when I'm talking about something so serious, but literally, if you do nothing else for the next week, start paying attention to how often you're overriding your signal that it's time to go to the bathroom. Just do that. And then add once that's normalized and you're sort of like, "Oh, okay, I can do that. I can meet that need." Then start sipping water when you feel thirsty, not 2 hours later, not a half hour later. Start actually drinking water when you're thirsty. What would happen if you rested for 10 minutes when you were tired instead of scrolling, instead of continuing, instead of writing another email, you sat down and took a few deep breaths and rested? How might your day be different? What would happen if when you were like, "Oh, I'm so uncomfortable in this chair, I have to move around," you got up and walked around the block? I'm not telling you to walk a 5K. I'm not telling you to go for a run. I'm not telling you to get on your Peloton. I'm saying, what would happen if you interrupted your day a couple of times and walked around the block and then came home? You don't know because you're not doing it. But what would happen if you tried? Let's figure that out first. How much energy can we buy back doing really simple things? And then usually you'll have to dig into what are the external and the internal factors. So once you have a little bit of energy back and you can start to really look at things, we have to find out, okay, which parts of this burnout are because of things that I'm doing, ways that I'm acting. That might be trauma responses, that might be but I'm still doing people pleasing, perfectionism, poor boundaries, inability to ask for help. We could go on, right? And which pieces of this are external? I actually have a boss that's a bully. And that's really unhelpful. I don't actually, I'm just saying. In somebody's situation, I'm my own boss, so if I was a bully to myself, that would be bad news. But I have a boss who's a bully, or I have a coworker who constantly undermines me, or I work in a situation that doesn't respect the fact that I'm a mother, and every time I try to leave to pick my kids up from school on time, I'm getting dirty looks and people are making snide comments. How unhealthy is the environment that you're in, and how much influence do you have to change it? Then we bring that eventually to this question of, do I quit or do I grit? Can I make this better and improve it for myself if I work on these internal factors and ask for change in these external factors? Or is this external environment just really not suitable for me? So I have to create a graceful exit strategy so that I can go find another environment that's better.
Wow. Wow. Great place to start. Love the suggestion of starting with the resentment journal and then that simple self-care, pee when you need to pee. That's really good, Cait. We can do that. I
Right?
love that. So, Cait, you got so much good stuff. Your book, The Bounce Back Ability Factor, is fantastic. Your Fried, the Burnout Podcast, is great. It's at caitdonovan.com. If you want to go deeper with the idea of the whole, oh, hey, I'd like to really understand the resentment journal. She's got a resentment journal mini course. Again, go to caitdonovan.com. That's CAITDONOVAN.com. Cait, I so appreciate all of this and this brutal honesty, understanding how to increase our internal safety, how to self-trust more, and how to pee when we need to pee. Super good stuff, Cait. I appreciate you very much. Thank you, my friend.